I've spent most of my life fixing things that people had long since given up on. Radios, old cassette decks, amplifiers, anything that still had a heartbeat buried somewhere under rust and dust. There's a strange comfort in bringing those machines back to life. They never talk back, never argue. You can hear when they're hurting, you can feel it when they're fixed. I guess that's why I opened my little repair shop off Route 19, right before you hit the ridge road that leads out toward the mountains. The shop's always been quiet. Some nights the silence feels heavy, like the soundproofing's holding something in rather than keeping noise out. I'd gotten used to it though, used to the hum of old transformers, the occasional pop from the soldering iron, and the static of test speakers that I never seemed to shut off completely. It was late October when this all started. I remember because the leaves outside had turned this deep burnt red, and every time the door opened, the wind would carry a few inside that'd get caught under the counter. That night a man dropped off a box full of old audio gear. Said it came from his uncle's attic after he passed. Dusty, but nothing special. An old Sony deck, a few cracked headphones, a milk crate of tapes without labels. I told him I'd look through it. He nodded, didn't even wait for a receipt. Just left. I started cleaning the deck that night. It was a nice model, built solid, back when things were made to last. I had the front open, was rubbing down the playback head with alcohol when I noticed a cassette still inside. No label, just plain black plastic, but it had this odd weight to it. When I tried to shake it, something inside moved, like sand, or maybe loose tape. I thought it was junk, but curiosity gets the better of you when you're alone enough, so I popped it in. At first, all I heard was static. A clean hiss, steady, the kind that fills the space between your ears until you start hearing shapes in it. I adjusted the gain, fiddled with the tracking, waiting for some muffled voice from an old recording to come through. But then I froze. Somewhere beneath the static, a whisper pressed through, my name. Soft at first, just a breath of sound, but it was there. Caleb. I sat still, staring at the reels. The whisper came again, longer this time, like it was crawling its way out of the noise. Caleb, don't stop. My first thought was interference. I'd had CB chatter bleed through before, even a local radio preacher once, but this wasn't that. It wasn't coming through the signal, it was inside it. I could feel it, like the voice had found a pocket of air just for itself. I pulled the tape out and looked it over. Perfectly normal. No cracks, no warping. I slid it back in, hit play again. Don't stop. The voice was sharper now, clearer, almost level with my breathing. I turned off the lights in the shop without even meaning to, like I needed to hear better. The glow of the deck's display was the only light left. The reels spun. Then it said something new, closer. I leaned toward the speaker. The static fluttered, almost like it was responding to me. My own breath came through faintly on the mic, though there was no mic connected. I could hear myself breathing, echoing back a second late. That's when I unplugged the deck, but the whisper didn't stop. The static faded, but the voice kept on talking, quieter, as though it were still spinning in the air around the machine. I felt the hum in my fingers, low and steady, coming from the tape itself. I set it down on the counter, grabbed a screwdriver, and tried to pry it open. The plastic cracked but wouldn't separate. It was like it didn't want to let go. I pressed harder, and that's when I heard it, right in my ear, not from the machine this time. Now I'm with you. I must have blacked out. When I came to, the clock on the wall said 3:17 a.m., and the deck was gone from the counter. The box it came in was empty too. I searched the shop from top to bottom, even went outside with a flashlight, thinking maybe I'd walked it out in some kind of daze. But the ground was still wet from rain earlier, and there were no footprints. I remember standing in the doorway, breathing cold air, realizing I was still hearing static, faint, like it was leaking out of the night itself. That was the first night. The next day, I tried to pretend nothing had happened. I worked on a radio from a retired teacher up in Clay County, fixed a loose resistor, and spent the afternoon pretending the tension in my shoulders was just lack of sleep. But when I turned the radio on to test it, the same whisper laced the music. So quiet it could have been imagination, but I knew that voice. I said my own name out loud. Caleb, and the voice whispered it back. That night I took every speaker out of the shop, disconnected the power, sat in silence. But the silence wasn't silent anymore. It had a heartbeat, mine, echoing back, half a second late, like something else was trying to sync with me. Over the next few days, it spread. My phone, my car stereo, even the hum of the refrigerator started catching that same undercurrent. A soft static, carrying faint words I couldn't always make out. Sometimes it said my name. Sometimes it was just breathing. I stopped taking repair jobs altogether. I spent hours sitting in front of the dead cassette deck, waiting for the voice to come back. I thought maybe if I could talk to it, if I could record it, it would explain itself. I set up an old mic, turned on my reel-to-reel and just asked, "What do you want?" The tape spun for 10 minutes in perfect silence. Then, just as I was about to stop it, I heard something faint, like metal scraping. Then, a word. Remember. I listened to that word over and over until my ears rang. Remember what? I didn't know. But something inside me started to shift. I began to feel like I did remember, though I couldn't say what. Just flashes, wood, smoke, someone crying. That night I dreamed of a field. Dead grass under a gray sky. A cassette tape half buried in dirt. I could hear static, far away but pulling closer. I woke up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand. No number, just a faint hiss through the speaker when I answered. Then, closer, the line went dead. By the end of that week, I couldn't bear to hear music. Every note was haunted, every melody a carrier for something beneath it. I tried to stay with silence, but silence wasn't safe either. It waited for sound, then filled it. I went to visit the man who'd dropped off the box. Thought maybe he'd know something. But when I called the number on the receipt pad, the voice on the other end said no one by that name lived there. I checked the address he'd written. It didn't exist. Still, I drove that way. Out past the ridge where the trees get tall and the fog starts to cling to the road. I found an old house half collapsed on itself, roof caved in, mailbox rusted. The number matched. Inside, it smelled of mildew and something metallic. There were old cassette decks stacked in corners, most broken open, tape guts spilling out. In the middle of the room, a single one sat upright on a crate, plugged into nothing. The reels were spinning slowly, feeding blank tape from one side to the other. I stood there watching it for what felt like an hour, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Then the reel stopped. The air went heavy, and from the shadows a voice said, "You kept it." I turned, but there was no one there. Just that smell of burning dust and the faint warmth on the back of my neck like someone had leaned in too close. I ran out of there, got in my truck, and drove until the sky turned orange. When I got back to the shop, the cassette deck I'd lost was sitting on the counter. Clean, like it had never left. That night, I decided to destroy it. I took it behind the shop, poured lighter fluid over it, and set it on fire. The flames caught quick, burning bright, but there was no melting plastic smell. It burned clean like paper. Then I heard it, clear as ever, right behind my ear. "Now I'm with you." Everything went dark. When I woke up, it was morning again. My hands were black with soot, and the deck was gone, but the smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. I went inside and turned on the radio out of habit, some old country station out of Charleston, and right between songs, a voice cut through. My voice, saying, "Don't stop." I unplugged it, threw it across the room. The sound didn't stop. It was everywhere now, in the air, in the floorboards, in the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Weeks went by. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear static and see that same gray field. The whisper was always there, repeating my name, sometimes pleading, sometimes laughing. I couldn't tell anymore if it was in the machines or in me. A few nights ago, a customer dropped off a radio to repair. I told myself I wouldn't touch it, but when the shop got quiet, I plugged it in. The moment I did, the voice came through again. Only this time it didn't say my name. It said yours. And now, every time I play something, even music, even silence, I hear that same breath behind it, whispering to whoever's listening. The static finds new homes. That's how it moves. Through machines, through sound. So if you ever hear something under the music, just a faint whisper saying your name, don't stop the tape, because that's when it starts listening back. I've always loved the mountains in summer. Something about the way the fog hangs low in the mornings, like the land itself is still waking up, makes me feel small in a good way. My cousin Luke and I used to spend weeks up there, hiking, fishing, camping, anywhere we could pitch a tent. He was the kind of guy who found peace in things most people would call lonely. The hiss of wind through trees, the sound of creek water on stone. That summer, he'd gotten himself a fancy field recorder, one of those little handheld things sound guys use for movies. Said he wanted to make an ambiance album, just nature sounds, pure and untouched. I laughed at him for spending money on what a phone could do, but Luke was particular. He said it wasn't about recording the woods. It was about listening to them. We left early one Friday in July, drove up through Boone, turned off onto a forest road barely wide enough for the truck. The kind of place where your phone loses signal before the pavement even ends. We parked at an old trailhead where the sign was so faded you could barely read it. Something about an old fire road that hadn't been maintained in years. Perfect, Luke said. Quiet. We hiked for hours. The deeper we went, the stranger the woods felt. Everything looked alive, but in a tired way. Moss heavy on the trees, ferns bending under their own weight. No birds calling after noon. Just the wind and the creak of old limbs. By the time we made camp near a small clearing, the sun had already dropped behind the ridge. Luke set up the recorder right away, placing it on a flat rock a few feet from the fire pit. He grinned at me like a kid, adjusting the little mic windscreen and checking levels. "You'll see," he said. "These woods sound different at night." When we finally settled down, the world around us went completely still. No cars, no planes, no people. Just the soft, rhythmic chorus of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. I remember thinking how thick the darkness felt, the kind that swallows the beam of your flashlight before it hits the next tree. We talked a little. Mostly small stuff, old stories, jokes, the kind of things cousins bring up when the world feels far away. At some point, Luke asked, "You ever notice how quiet it gets when you stop talking?" I nodded. He turned off his headlamp and said, "Listen." And we did. No wind. No insects. No night birds. Just this slow, deep hum. Not from anything around us, but from beneath. Like the ground itself was breathing. I don't know how long we sat like that before the noises came back, but when they did, it was sudden. Everything alive again, all at once. We didn't say much after that. Eventually, we crawled into our sleeping bags, the recorder's little red light blinking steady by the fire. The next morning, Luke was eager to listen. He rewound the recording and hit play, smiling like a kid on Christmas. At first, it was exactly what we expected. The wind, the fire crackling, our voices low and laughing. Then came that quiet moment where we'd stopped talking, and that's when we heard her. A woman's voice, soft and drawn out, buried under the hum. "You shouldn't have come here." Luke frowned, glanced at me like I'd played some trick. I hadn't. The voice didn't sound like interference or an echo. It sounded close, like she was sitting right next to the mic. We replayed it a dozen times. Each time the words seemed clearer, the tone more deliberate. The accent was local, Appalachian, slow, lilting, tired. I could almost picture her, maybe an old woman, someone who used to live out there before the forest took her home back. Luke laughed it off. "Probably a stray CB signal," he said. "Some trucker ghosting through the valley, but I could tell it rattled him. That night he wanted to test it again. Said we'd leave the recorder running while we slept, just to see if it picked up anything strange." I didn't want to, but arguing with Luke never went anywhere. He set the recorder on a fallen log near our tent, hit record, and said, "All right, lady, let's hear your story." We went to bed around midnight. The fire burned low, and I drifted off to the rhythm of crickets and distant wind. Sometime later, I woke up, not to a sound, but to the absence of one. It was dead quiet again. The air felt heavy, pressing against the tent. I could hear my heartbeat loud in my ears. I whispered Luke's name. No answer. His sleeping bag was zipped, unmoving. I told myself he was just asleep and forced my eyes shut. Eventually, the forest noises crept back in, soft, hesitant. When morning came, sunlight hit the tent like a slap. I rolled over to nudge Luke awake, but his bag was empty. Flattened, still zipped halfway. I sat up fast, called out for him. Nothing. The woods were alive again. Birds, wind, the sound of water trickling nearby. But no Luke. Then I saw the recorder. Sitting right on top of his sleeping bag, the little red light still blinking. I hit stop, rewound it, and pressed play. The first few minutes were normal. Our quiet breathing, the fire crackling outside. Then, about an hour in, Luke's voice came through. "You awake?" He whispered. No answer. "You hear that?" A shuffle. Then footsteps, soft, moving away from the tent. "Hello?" he said, his voice small. Then came another voice. The woman again. Closer this time. Don't go far, Luke. I froze. My cousin's name. She'd said his name. There was a long stretch of silence, broken only by Luke's breathing, quick, uneven. Then he whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. Just the sound of twigs snapping, like someone circling him. Then a rustle, a thud, the microphone brushing fabric. Luke screamed once, not loud, just sharp, like he'd been grabbed. And then, after a few seconds, her voice again. One left. The rest of the tape was static. I don't remember packing. I don't even remember hiking back. Just flashes, running through the trees, sunlight flickering through branches, my throat dry and raw. By the time I reached the truck, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in. I drove until I hit Boone, straight to the sheriff's office. Told them everything. They sent out a search team. Found our campsite the next day. Luke's pack was still there, torn open. No signs of a struggle, no blood, just the log where the recorder had sat, and a small impression in the dirt next to it. Like someone had been sitting cross-legged, waiting. They never found him. The sheriff said animals could have dragged him off, or maybe he got turned around and fell somewhere. The recorder, though, I didn't tell them I'd kept it. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I told myself I just needed to know. Needed proof that what I'd heard was real. 2 weeks later, I was back home, sitting in the dark of my living room, when I decided to play it again. I figured maybe I'd missed something. Some clue in the background. Some sound that could tell me where he went. The tape hissed, the familiar hum filling the room. Then faintly a new voice came through, not the woman's, Luke's. "Hey man," he said softly. "You shouldn't listen anymore." I paused the tape, my stomach turning over. My throat felt dry. Slowly I hit play again. "You shouldn't have come here," the woman said, overlapping his voice, then both voices together. In perfect unison, one left. The tape clicked off. I sat there for a long time, staring at the recorder, the red light reflecting off the window. Finally, I reached over and ejected the tape. It felt warm, too warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind through the trees outside carried a whisper I couldn't quite make out. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed I was back in that clearing. The fire was still burning, small and quiet. Across from me, Luke sat on the log, head tilted down. The recorder was in his lap. He looked up, and I could see his mouth moving, but no sound came out. The tape reels inside the recorder were spinning faster and faster until the machine started to hum like a heartbeat. Then, from somewhere behind me, a voice said, "Don't turn around." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The air in my room felt charged, heavy. I reached for the recorder on my nightstand. I don't even remember bringing it in there. And it was already on. The red light was blinking. I hadn't pressed record. I could hear breathing through the speaker. Not mine, slow, shallow, patient. Then a soft rustle, like someone adjusting their weight on the other end. "Do you miss him?" the voice asked. I threw the recorder across the room. It hit the wall and cracked, the battery compartment flying off. The sound cut out instantly. For a while I thought that was the end of it. I boxed up what was left, buried it out back behind the shed. But the thing about sound is, it doesn't stay buried. Now whenever I'm outside at night, I swear I hear it. Faintly under the chirping in the wind, the same low drawl, carrying from somewhere deeper in the woods. Sometimes it says my name. Sometimes it just hums that same low tone from our first night up there, and sometimes, when the wind dies down and everything goes still, I can hear Luke's voice again, closer every time. End of story. Approx 2,400 words. I worked the graveyard shift at a small AM radio station just off Route 60, outside a nowhere town called Meadow Creek. The kind of place where the only people listening are truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional old-timer with a ham radio and too much time on his hands. We mostly played oldies, slow country, gospel, a few local ads. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and the quiet of the night never bothered me. Most nights followed the same rhythm. Midnight till 6. The world asleep, the fluorescent hum of the control room my only company. I'd take calls from drunks, preachers, or folks wanting to dedicate "I'll Fly Away" to someone who'd passed. I liked that part, hearing the way their voices softened when they spoke names that still meant something. But around 3 in the morning, always around 3, the signal would dip. The static would creep in just enough to make me tap the console. Old equipment, sure, but something about that hour made it feel alive. Sometimes the feedback came through like whispers, like someone brushing their lips against the microphone from somewhere far away. I told myself it was just cross interference, maybe an overlapping AM band from Charleston or Bluefield. Then came that one night. It was early spring, the kind of cold that clings to your bones even inside. The station was half underground, just a narrow room lined with dusty vinyl, an old transmitter that rattled like a dying fan, and a single window that looked out into black nothing. I remember checking the clock, 3:02. The red second hand moved smooth, no ticks. The kind of clock that never seems to speed up or slow down. Even when you wanted to, I'd just queued up a gospel reel. An old recording from a local church group back in the 60s, the Wayward Saints, I think they were called. The tape was worn, but still good enough to air. I let it roll, leaned back in the chair, and half dozed with my headphones on. Then the music started to change. At first it sounded like the reel was warping, the pitch bending ever so slightly, the harmonies sliding off key. I sat up thinking maybe the tape was unraveling. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't distortion. The melody itself was shifting, stretching into something else entirely. The voices multiplied, not 4 singers anymore, but dozens. Men, women, children, all layered together in perfect harmony. The hymn wasn't one I recognized. It was in English, but the phrasing was wrong. The words tumbled over one another, like a language being remembered rather than spoken, and God, the sound of it. It was beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. The kind of beauty that hurts to hear. My skin prickled, my throat went dry. I tried to stop the reel, but when I hit pause, the music didn't stop. It kept playing, not from the speakers, from the room itself. The air vibrated low and deep, like the concrete walls were humming. I took my headphones off and it only got louder. The glass in the window started to quiver, and I could see the radio dials shaking on their own. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. It pressed into me, into the floor, into everything. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence afterward felt thick, too still. I waited for the hum of the machines to come back, but the air itself seemed to be holding its breath. I checked the transmitter log. Nothing. No external signals, no feed interruptions. I called the manager, left a message. He wouldn't answer. When I finally replayed the reel, the normal hymn was there again, exactly as recorded. But under it, faint, buried in the static, I could hear them. The same choir, whispering this time. Their voices like wind through reeds, soft but endless. I drove home that morning with the radio off, windows down. I couldn't stand the thought of hearing a single note. The next few nights, everything seemed fine, routine. But I started noticing strange things on the recording logs. Timestamps missing. Reels with extra minutes of blank tape that I didn't remember running. One night I caught myself humming under my breath. A tune I didn't know. I stopped immediately. When I got home, I realized I was still humming. Quietly, without thinking. It didn't stop when I went to bed. 3 days later, the manager finally called me back. Said he'd reviewed the broadcast tapes from that night. Told me everything had sounded normal on air. If there was a problem, he said, it didn't come from here. I didn't argue. But I knew what I'd heard. Still, I needed proof. I started bringing my own cassette recorder to the station. Set it next to the board. It recorded 250 every night. For 3 nights, I got nothing but hums and local chatter. On the 4th, right as the clock hit 3:03, the room changed again. The fluorescent lights flickered. The signal meter swung from left to right. And that same choir came through, clear, as if they were right behind me. The voices swelled until I couldn't hear my own breathing. It was the same melody, but this time the words were sharp. You know the song, they sang. I felt something wet on my face. Blood. My nose was bleeding, thick drops hitting the control board. I fumbled to stop the reel, but my hands wouldn't listen. The sound built higher and higher, until it wasn't singing anymore. It was screaming in harmony. All of them still perfectly in tune, and then it all went dead. I woke up on the floor to the morning DJ shaking me. The sun was up. My tape recorder was gone. The board looked untouched. I told him I must have dozed off. He laughed, said he'd been hearing weird tones on the transmitter lately, like someone tuning an organ through the static. I quit that job a week later, but the music didn't stop. At first, it followed me in small ways, the hum of the fridge catching the same rhythm, the wind through the trees sounding just a little too deliberate. Then, one night, I turned on my living room TV, and the choir came through the static of an empty channel. Clear as day, they were singing the same impossible hymn. I unplugged the set, but the sound kept going, filling the house. I screamed for it to stop, but the moment I opened my mouth, I realized I was singing with them. The words spilled out without meaning, strange syllables that didn't belong to any language I knew, but felt carved into my chest. When I came to, it was morning again. The TV was cold. The air smelled of ozone. My throat ached like I'd been shouting for hours. I tried to record it again, to capture proof, but every device I used failed. The mics would distort, the batteries would drain, and each night at exactly 3:03, I'd wake to the faint sound of a choir somewhere in the distance. Not from outside, from within the walls. It's been months now. I moved 3 towns over, took a warehouse job just to stay busy. I don't play music anymore. I can't. Every melody turns into that one. Every hum, every low drone finds its way back to their tune. A few nights ago, curiosity got the better of me. I went online, searched through old archives of local church music from the area. And there it was, a recording dated 1954, labeled Congregation of St. Beulah Meadow Creek. I clicked play. The first few seconds were just old tape hiss. Then the voices started. It was them, same hymn, same tone. But this time, right at the end, the choir faded and a single woman spoke. Her voice cracked with age but clear. "He sang with us," she said. The clip ended there. I checked the file info. Last played 3:03 a.m. That was impossible. I hadn't even opened it yet. Now every night without fail, I wake up humming. I can't remember when it starts or when it stops. The melody never changes. It's always that same sequence of notes. Slow, rising, falling, like a breath in reverse. Last night I caught my reflection in the window while it happened. My mouth was moving, but my eyes weren't mine. They looked distant, focused. I realized then that the singing wasn't coming from me. It was coming through me, and somewhere, out there in the static. The choir is still performing, waiting for the next voice to join. If you ever find yourself awake at 3 a.m., and the radio hums just a little too long between songs, don't listen, don't hum along, don't even breathe, because once you do, you'll never stop hearing it, and sooner or later, you'll start to sing back.